Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So in this one here, I wanted to talk about something that Scott Gimple actually said during an event here regarding Rick and Michonne. And he really does tease the fact that it's very, very possible that we're going to see the characters again. I do want to get into his exact quote here, so yeah, we'll get into that. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. We're now in the first week of March here, right? Like the first work week of March. So I do wonder if, you know, there's going to be some stuff coming out this week specifically. It does seem like the social media accounts for The Walking Dead and AMC are a lot more active with things, you know, related to The Walking Dead. So I'm excited about the fact that, yeah, we're probably going to see some artwork for the show very soon. The show is coming out exactly, you know, 2 months tomorrow. So, I mean, it makes sense. The trailer is going to be out this month. They wouldn't wait till April. That's way too late to show the trailer. So that should be out this month. I did a video the other day, or I think it was yesterday, talking about the sneak peek that we're going to be getting on March 23rd. So yeah, a lot to look forward to this month, and I'll break everything down. So definitely make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my breakdowns for The Walking Dead, and also for Daredevil as well, because I will be covering Daredevil and doing reviews and breakdowns and stuff of that show, as well as The Last of Us, but that's next month, right? So I'm really looking forward to Daredevil. I'm actually very happy that the show's coming out more in the evening, because I think just for myself, in terms of my own schedule, it would be very hard to watch the show in the morning tomorrow, do a review and breakdown and all that, you know, throughout the day. And yeah, I would just prefer to watch that at nighttime. So my review and breakdown of episode 1 and 2 for Daredevil will be out tomorrow night. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I'll try to do a lot of videos on Daredevil. It depends on what the episodes are like anyways. But let's talk about what Scott Gimple said here. So to get into his exact quote here, and I'm seeing this here from at TOWL_AMC, which I believe is just a fan account. It's not actually AMC or anything, but there's a lot of daily updates and news and whatnot for The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, and things related to Rick and Michonne and stuff like that. So yeah, Scott Gimple actually was at an event called Multicon 2025 in LA. I believe that happened, I don't know if that was last weekend or the weekend before. I think I just heard of this though, and it was the event that I was talking about in terms of he was going to be there with other Walking Dead actors, but we never really heard anything from the event. So I was wondering well, did he ever say anything here? But we actually have a quote here from what he said. So he was asked about basically are we ever going to see Rick and Michonne again? Is it possible, I guess, to get a season 2 of The Ones Who Live? Or is it going to be, you know, just what everyone's wondering, are we going to see Rick and Michonne again? And this is what he had to say on that. I mean, the plan was to keep it limited, not necessarily never to see those characters again, but to keep it limited. But I always say, you never know. There's so many. I've been very careful as to say, oh, that'll never happen, because it does. So, you know, there are possibilities. And there's possibilities of all sorts of stranger iterations of shows with those characters, with other characters. So, you know, I think it's entirely possible. And this is really, really interesting, because the way Scott Gimple talked about Rick and Michonne coming back in the future before this was very much you know, he hopes it can happen, and you know, obviously he would want it to happen, but it's just something that maybe it's maybe the stories that he has for the characters are just stories that he has in his head, you know. But yeah, he hopes that it would happen, sort of thing. And obviously we've heard from Denai Guerrero. Actually, she's been a lot more quieter on this, which isn't a bad thing or anything like that, because again, I always bring up the example from, I don't know when this was, if it was in the fall, but she was asked about Marvel. She was asked 2 things about Marvel and The Walking Dead. And she was asked if she was ever going to return to Marvel, and she just kind of said she doesn't know, or I don't remember exactly what she said, but she really had no idea at all. And then she was asked about The Walking Dead, and she was quiet about it. So that right there, I was like, oh, what does that mean? Right? And Andrew Lincoln obviously talked about where he would like Rick's story to go. That happened last summer, spring, summer, or whatever. And you know, the whole he would like Rick's story to be like the next story, anything to be simplistic survival horror or whatever he was saying. So, you know, and now we're hearing what Scott Gimple is saying here in terms of, yeah, just exactly what I just read there. So I think it's very interesting. So let's actually break down what he says here. The first part here he says is, I mean, the plan was to keep it limited. I think I've seen a lot of comments on this specific part here where he says the plan was to keep it limited. I think it depends on how you interpret that. You can interpret it as you know, the plan was to keep it limited, but now it's not, right? Or you could just say well, the plan was to keep it limited, because he does say the quote here is, I mean, the plan was to keep it limited, not necessarily never to see those characters again, but to keep it limited. And so I think he's just saying the plan was to keep it limited, right? That was just sort of the point of that. Like maybe there is a season 2, like maybe that was something there. Like he does say was, like the plan was. So it is a possibility. For me, I think he was just more referring to the fact that like that was always the plan, was like to just keep that show limited. And so, you know, what he says afterwards is what is really interesting, which is he always says you never know, right? And the way he's saying it too, he seems very like calm and like confident and just like it's a little bit more cryptic, right? It's not so like, and again, this is just sort of my interpretation of, you know, watching the interview or whatever, but it's almost a little different. It's like he kind of knows or has an idea of like what's happening next with Rick and Michonne. But to get into what he says there at the very end, like he says, so, you know, there are possibilities, and there's possibilities of all sorts of stranger iterations of shows with those characters, with other characters. So, you know, I think it's entirely possible. I feel like what he's referring to there is that obviously he's just trying to say, like, he can't confirm anything. He doesn't want to get into any of that because obviously I think confirming that would be like, I mean, you never know. Like, obviously they could be working on the story. Like, they're very, you know, much in the process of like, okay, we really like this. Like, we want to go in this direction kind of thing. But like, confirming it right now would just be kind of insane, right? Like, I feel like wait till you're very confident. Wait till Andrew Lincoln and Denai Guerrero are very confident in like the story. And like, yeah, like they'll definitely come back and do the story. And then let AMC announce it, right? Like, Gimple can't really say anything. And Gimple's never really said anything like that anyways. I feel like unless AMC says like, yeah, you can talk about that kind of thing, right? So I think what he said here in terms of there are possibilities, and there's possibilities of all sorts of stranger iterations of shows with those characters, that part is really interesting because that almost like confirms, I mean, it could be two things: Rick and Michonne being on The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon or on The Walking Dead Dead City, or like a new series, right? Like having like just a different type of story with those characters. So it's not going to be The Ones Who Live season 2. It'll just be a different story. Or he mentions other characters as well. He just sort of throws it out there. Like there could be other characters that could be in a different spinoff, right? So I think that what he says there, and also at the end, he says, I think it's entirely possible. I feel like this is definitely the closest we've been to like confirmation that Rick and Michonne will be in another story at some point. I don't know when. Like the fact that this is happening now, or that he said this now, and like there's some rumors of something filming later on this year in the summer. You know, I'm really wondering if there is going to be some sort of announcement of something. And like I think of at Andy Lincoln News's, you know, tweet about Rick could appear in another spinoff or something in the Walking Dead universe. Like obviously that was just sort of, it wasn't confirmation or anything that it was going to happen, but it just makes me wonder if there's something out there now that like they kind of know when it's going to happen. And when you look at what Gimple said here, saying that, and there's possibilities of all sorts of stranger iterations of shows with those characters, I really wonder if that's where they're going now, if there's going to be a new series announced with Rick and Michonne, or if they'll just appear in like, say, Dead City season 2 or 3, you know, The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 4, like maybe season 3 is setting that up for season 4. Like I just wonder if there's going to be some stuff like that building up to something. Like I really do feel like that's where we're going right now. And just, you know, when he says at the very end there, like, I think it's entirely possible, like basically he thinks it's entirely possible that we could see Rick and Michonne again. Like that right there to me is just like, that is so different from what he said before, where it's like he's hoping, right? He's hoping it could happen. He would love to see it happen. And now he's saying, I think it's entirely possible. I just think that there's a little bit more confidence to what he's saying. And again, that could just be me interpreting that, but that's just how I kind of feel about this. Like I could be wrong, but that's how I feel about this. So in terms of what I would like, you know, the next story to be here for Rick and Michonne, like obviously if they're just saying, yeah, they're going to be coming back, like I'll be happy no matter what, right? But in terms of what I would like their next story to be, I guess I would really like their story to focus on like a lot of what their home life is like. You know, that's sort of my issue with them going to like The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. Like again, if they did go there to like season 4 or something, like, and they're in a different place, I think that would just be really cool. But I do want to see a little bit more of the Commonwealth, and I want to see just some of what that story is there, right? Like The Walking Dead ended in a way where it was, I mean, obviously it ended that story, but like Rick and Michonne going back, I have questions on where they went back to. Like, did they even go back to Alexandria, or did they go somewhere else? Like, I don't know what it's like now for the characters. I want to know where like they all are at right now. Like, are they staying in Alexandria or the Commonwealth, or are they just going to leave and go somewhere else entirely different? Right? It's so hard to say because they can really take the story anywhere. But I would love it if, the story did start with them in Alexandria, for sure. Like maybe by the end of the series, they leave Alexandria. Like I do understand that aspect to it, but I also get it because Carl is there as well. So maybe Rick, he's been away from home for way too long. Would it make sense for him to be like, all right, we're going to find a new place and start a new home here? Like, I don't know if he would think like that because he's been away for so long. I think he just wants to be back home, So I feel like Alexandria makes so much sense for Rick, especially Michonne too, because she was also gone for a few years. Like she wasn't gone as long as Rick, but she was gone for a while. So I feel like it makes sense, go back to Alexandria. And I think rebuilding that place and focusing on a lot of that would be really cool. And I think that that's why I would prefer a new series with Rick and Michonne instead of having those characters show up in like other spinoffs. I feel like, honestly, it's going to be a combination of all of it. That's kind of how I view everything here. Is it's going to be a combination of Rick and Michonne are going to appear sometimes in like maybe Dead City or like The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, or like maybe a different spinoff where they're there for like one episode or something. And then there's also going to be like this bigger story that's sort of being built up right now. I feel like that's why there's just so many possibilities with this. I think it's because there's literally a lot of possibilities. Like, again, I'll read exactly what Scott Gimple said when asked about, are we going to see Rick and Michonne again? And he said, the plan was to keep it limited. I guess that was referring to The Ones Who Live and getting like another season of The Ones Who Live. But yeah, he says, the plan was to keep it limited, not necessarily never to see those characters again, but to keep it limited. But I always say, you never know. There's so many. I've been very careful as to say, oh, that'll never happen, because it does. So, there are possibilities, and there's possibilities of all sorts of stranger iterations of shows with those characters, with other characters. So, I think it's entirely possible. That right there, to me, I feel like there's a lot more confidence here from Gimple in terms of, like Rick and Michonne coming back. It's not just like, well, I would hope this would happen. Like I would love to see that. It's a lot of like, he's talking about possibilities and like, we could be doing this. And the fact that he thinks it's possible and that he's not hoping anymore about it, that right there gives me a lot of confidence in like, yeah, I think that is going to happen. And it's just sort of how, right? Like, I think that's one of the things that we'll probably be talking about for a while. Is just how are they going to come back? Is it going to be in Dead City season 2? Probably not. But like in season 3, or is it going to be in Daryl Dixon season 3 or season 4? Are we going to start to see a lot of setup here, like in these shows? I think that's sort of where we're at now with a lot of this. But yeah, this is really exciting to me personally, but I will leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below on this. Do you think Rick and Michonne will be back in a new series? Do you think that The Ones Who Live season 2 will happen? Or do you think it's going to be them showing up on like The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon or The Walking Dead Dead City? I do think at this point that The Walking Dead The Ones Who Live season 2 might not happen. And the reason why I feel like that is just because, like, I know I've talked about this a lot. I go back and forth on this quite a bit, but I really do feel like in terms of, this story, that it is sort of a standalone story. It was Rick and Michonne's reunion story, and to do a season 2 would just be like continuing that story, but like making the story something else. And I don't know, the title The Ones Who Live works for that story. So I think that the next part of the story, there's going to be a different meaning there. And so the title will be different. So that's why I feel like that's sort of their approach to it. And that's why Gimple says here in the quote that, it was always sort of meant to be limited, but then he talks about the possibilities of doing this and that, and then he thinks it's entirely possible. So I feel like that is exactly what it's going to be. It's just sort of figuring out whether it's going to be on, I guess The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon or Dead City, or is it going to be in a new series? We'll have to wait and see. But post all your thoughts down below. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.